Okay, making sure everything's good. Okay. How do I know if this is live? Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to our Power Breakfast. My name is Alex Garcia. I am the communication officer at PPTV. I'm currently based in Laredo, Texas. So shout out to 956. And yeah, welcome to our Power Breakfast. If this is your very first time tuning in, Power Breakfast is essentially a space where we give candidates to talk about what is energizing them throughout this election cycle. So this morning we actually have Lorenzo Sanchez, who will be coming in at, I'll let him in once he requests to join. But yeah, so a little bit of information before Lorenzo comes on. So early vote is just a few days away. So next Tuesday, October 13th, Texas will start casting their votes. And so we want to make sure that you guys make a plan. Make sure that if you're going to be voting in person, that you do it in a safe way. You wear gloves, a mask, hand sanitizer. If you're going to be voting by ballot, make sure to submit that application today. Do not wait, but the deadline is October 23rd. So make sure to do that as soon as you can. All right, so just waiting on Lorenzo. So how's everyone doing this morning? I am currently drinking this coffee from this coffee bar in Laredo called Gloria's. It's made with horchata, so that's fun. This is not a sponsored post, I promise. But yes, shout out to Gloria's. All right, let's see. Hello. Everyone's so happy this morning. I'm so tired. It's fine. Okay, so what else? What other information can I give y'all while we wait for Lorenzo? What was I gonna say? So yeah. Again, everyone make sure to have a plan. Hi to everyone that's on. Laura, Sarah, Iris, hello. Yeah, so let's see. So there's a lot. So we're always looking for volunteers. So if you have a passion in your heart to make change in our home state of Texas, PPTV is always looking for volunteers. That is the most powerful way to get out there and make sure that we have a big wave of victories this coming November. Okay, so I believe Lorenzo is here. But yes, we are phone banking every Monday and Thursday. But please keep a look at our emails as well as our social media for any updates in regards to volunteering. But yes, we have volunteer opportunities. So Lorenzo should be getting on. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
You know, we're hanging in there. I'm trying to figure out how to use technology. I'm like laptop. I guess we need to do it through phone only.
No, you're good. Yeah, I know. I wish we could do it through a laptop. You should see my setup. I have several shoe boxes. Just like trying. So thank you so much for making the time to be here with us. I know it's such a crazy election cycle and you're probably so busy. So yeah, thank you so much for, being on here and talking to us for a few minutes this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. We are really busy, but this is, crunch time. We only have so many days left, so I'm sure I won't be getting as much sleep as I probably should. But this is a really important moment in history for Collin County here where I am, but for the state of Texas and across our country. Hopefully, we can make a real difference if we just stay focused.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. We're so excited here at PPTV for your race and for all the races going around Texas and the history that's going to be made on November 3rd. But so we like to start off this Power Breakfast by asking our candidates, so what is giving you power today? What is energizing you to keep on going and to win this race?
Some of the attacks that are being used against me are definitely making me feel empowered. Whenever I see people lying about certain stances that I have and my campaign has, I feel the need to defend them and do a good job at that. So that has been motivating me. But really, the power and the time and effort that these volunteers are putting in, I could never do this alone. I don't come from money. That this is something I'm doing because I care about my community and I want to go be someone of service to them and bring accountability to our political system. But we have volunteers that spend 8 hours a day just making calls because they care that much. And we have volunteers of every background, of every color of the rainbow. I always like to say, and that's it's what keeps me motivated. I know I have the support of the people on the ground here in my community that really want change, and that's keeping me really motivated.
That's amazing. No, yeah, I think volunteers, every time it's like you hear a good story about them or they tell you that they had a really good phone call, it makes all the butterflies. But so can you tell us a little bit about your personal experience with Planned Parenthood and why do you support Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, so I was raised by a single mother. I was born in Chicago, really raised here. She brought me and my sister down here because she was looking to provide us with a better life than what she had. She wanted to make sure that we got into good schools where we could hopefully build the life that we'd be successful at or we'd find enjoyment in. And that is what, brings me so much joy to be doing what I'm doing now, because I know all that investment that was placed in me by my family members, by my teachers, and my community is what made me the fighter who I am today. Personal experiences with Planned Parenthood. I remember being in high school and, driving multiple friends to Planned Parenthood for different reasons. And just having those nurses and the doctors there being so open and willing to communicate with people, because we weren't getting that kind of education that we needed in high school, or maybe, some of my friends may not have felt comfortable speaking to their parents about it and wanted an outside influence to give them good information that they could rely on. So that's how I really started to get to know Planned Parenthood. Obviously, I've seen attacks that have taken place and see it as, people are continuing to try to take away the reproductive freedoms of Texans. And I am opposed to any of that. I'm opposed to anybody losing any sort of freedoms. I want every individual to know that they can live a life that is full and free here in Texas from discrimination, and they have the rights to how they live their life.
So it's really interesting that you bring up your personal experience from high school, from Planned Parenthood, because I think one of the most important things to us is that we have a reflective democracy, and that the people representing us know exactly what Planned Parenthood patients go through or have firsthand experience to those challenges and the obstacles sometimes politicians put in front of them. So can you tell us a little bit more how you would use that experience and how you would use it to legislate in the Texas House once you win?
Yeah, I think it's going to make me a better listener. I believe in science. I believe in people's right to make up their own mind. I also believe that they should be given, all the information they need necessary to make those decisions. But that information needs to be accurate. It needs to not be, leading people down a path of uncertainty or just lies, because people are making big life decisions based upon the information. I am committed to making sure that the next Speaker of the House, if the Democrats flip the House, is a pro-reproductive rights speaker. That's what my promise is. It's one of the bars that they would have to clear with me in order to get a vote from House District 67, hopefully their new representative. And I just think it's so important that we as a Democratic Party do not allow these outside influences to really, really affect the way that we're legislating. I would implore my colleagues, even if they are on the Democratic side, who use religious freedoms and religion in order to try to discriminate against people, to please stop that. It is only further hurting people. I've been endorsed by the Texas Secular Caucus. I'm a Christian myself, and I don't like that people use religion to try to control others' lives. And I don't think that, it's something that religion should even be getting involved in. That's a decision between that individual and whoever they choose to involve in that situation.
I am in complete agreement. I think it's very interesting that you're bringing this topic up, because I think your opponent is one who spearheads a lot of these efforts in the Texas House. So, something that I would like to ask is that, Jeff Leach has been in power for quite some time. So why do you feel like it's finally time for District 67 to have a new change, a wave of change?
Yeah, well, we see that, I'm in one of the most diverse districts in the state. There's been reports that say that Collin County is more diverse than Dallas County. There's people of every faith, every religion, every background, whatever it may be. And we see a legislator who's continuously trying to pass legislation that further divides our community. We see him trying to pass anti-Muslim bills when we have 6 in-district mosques or district-adjacent mosques. We see a legislator who continues to try to pass these religious freedom bills, which only discriminate against LGBTQ plus individuals, with the bathroom bill and these Chick-fil-A bills. When we have UTD sitting in the district, and that's rated one of the best universities for LGBTQ plus students to attend in our nation, that kind of representation does not add up with our community. Our community is good. We care about our families. We care about our neighbors. And we need a legislator who's going to actually find solutions to real problems that are going on in people's lives, and stop trying to find issues to continue to divide us. And it's really hurting some of the most at risk or the most in need. And I think it's time for everyone to stand up and be like, this is absolutely a rejection of those types of policies. We need leadership that's going to take care of us, that's going to, work on our behalf. And that's what we're trying to do here in Collin County, bring a new level of accountability that has never existed before. I'm asking voters to keep me accountable. I want to have those conversations every day. What are you doing to improve the reproductive rights of Texans? What are you doing to improve the lives of African Americans and Blacks within your community? What are we doing to do that? And I think a lot of these legislators just go down there and pass bills that, they already had in their head, thought down the pipeline. Maybe they've already been presented to them from, outside influences, some of their donors. And it just needs to stop. We need to start working on solving some of these really difficult issues and stop letting these politicians divide us.
Yeah, and I think something really uniquely about yourself from your opponent is that I feel like you're actually listening to your future constituents, going out there, door knocking, phone banking. So what are some of the things you're hearing from the people on the ground? I think it's very unique when a representative doesn't really have that angle and someone comes in, a grassroots campaign, and is talking to those volunteers, is talking to the people you're door knocking, is talking to the voters. So what are the things you're hearing on the ground?
people love it. They're so excited for the change. When I went to go before COVID, when I was door knocking every day, people would love to talk to me. Even when I get on the phone, I rarely get a bad phone call. I know all volunteers definitely have, hit or misses, but people like talking to the candidate. So I enjoy talking to people, and I don't approach people like, hey, I am this, and like, I'm here to run and represent you. I always go into people and be like, hey, I'm from this community. I'm running to represent you. What are things that are affecting in your life that you feel that Austin either isn't addressing, or that you would like to see Austin, do a better job of addressing? And that's when we start getting into the conversations where, it transcends that political divide, where people are talking about healthcare, they're talking about their kids, they're talking about their job, they're talking about COVID. These are all things that they're speaking about, and we seldomly get like the people that are like, well, Democrats are this, or you're this because you. I mean, I get it all the time, but not as often as one may think. And I think that's what's really important. And I think I'm approaching it from this angle because I'm trying to convince people to get behind a message that is different than what we've had before. So I understand the scariness that could be associated with that, or the uncertainty even. It doesn't have to be a fearful thing, but the uncertainty could cause people to want to withhold or fall, and really want to support these ideas. But I let them talk, and we get to the same spot on our own. Everyone believes that, the government shouldn't be getting involved in our lives in a way that is obviously, I mean, it's producing lies, and it's really harmful to public health. So I want to make sure that we continue to have difficult conversations, and I don't mind having these types of Texas, but I want to make sure that we continue to have those conversations in a really productive way, where we can share each other's feelings. But as far as discriminating against people, I had to come to the idea when I was young, at what time would I be okay restricting the rights of my mother or my sister, and the answer was never. So I was never okay with restricting their rights to the autonomy of their own bodies, especially. So I came to that realization that, this is where I stand, and I'm going to make sure that we fight for everybody, especially from, these attacks that seem to just be political to try to further divide us. But it's at the expense of, a majority of our population who really, needs to be having fair and equal access to every single realm of healthcare.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring up healthcare because, Texas is one of the most uninsured states in the nation. We have one of the lowest uninsured rates. And as a state representative, how would you fight to protect and expand Medicaid?
Yeah, that's like a big topic for me. I think Democrats are going to be, I mean, this is why Democrats were able to make such large inroads in 2018. It was on the topic of healthcare. So I think we would be, foolish to not continue this conversation. Texas has given away hundreds of billions of dollars this last decade by not expanding Medicaid. And that money, had it been invested 10 years ago, would have been returning its investment to us today. So this money not being put into the Texas economy and going to other states who've already expanded Medicaid has been harmful. We could have grown. We could have expanded healthcare. We could start to address some of these issues, like you're saying. We have we're the number one state for rural hospital closures. We're one of the number one states for maternal mortality rate. And instead of finding solutions to these things, they just continue to, bicker and argue and try to keep healthcare away from people that need it the most. So healthcare is a big issue for me. I have my mother here in district. She's in breast cancer remission. So I see the kind of things that even having insurance and how that plays out for people that are ill. And we need to start working towards a system where we can cover everybody. We need everybody to have access to affordable health care, and start working towards a system that's going to be able to provide that in the most efficient way possible. And then just leaders that are going to be willing to to find solutions to those problems we know we exist, like, the maternal mortality rate. Why haven't we had any solutions? This is not something that is unique to our state. Other states have corrected this and have done it in a very cost-effective way, but our state has refused to take any action on it. We have half of a political party arguing on one side, trying to make their voices heard, but we're being ignored.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's again so refreshing to hear candidates or candidate. I think it's so many right now in Texas that are bringing these topics and, actually taking in consideration what the community needs, which is crazy because that's what a representative is supposed to do. But I think, for a really long time, most Texas communities have been misrepresented. And it's so refreshing to have this wave of powerful and inspiring individuals running for the Texas House and ready to bring in that change. And that kind of skews into my next question. I think it's incredibly special what's happening right now in Texas. There's a lot of talk about, the different demographics and what's going to happen in November and what the influences are going to have. But I think something historic is going to happen. Whatever happens, something really historic is going to happen in Texas. And I want to ask you personally, how do you feel to be part of that? How do you feel to be part of the election cycle of 2020 in Texas? I feel like it's just so crazy and so special.
It is. And, I'm a first-time candidate. So whenever people ask me what's different about what you thought it would be like, the answer is everything. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We have, a criminal as a president. It has been one shot after another. We have our opponents, because they can't find anything negative to say about me, just making up lies now, along with the governor. Who would have thought that I would, a year or even 2 years ago, would have had the governor sending, lies about me over Twitter. It's just an insane place to be in. But people are ready for change. It's just so exciting. We've built the grassroots volunteer team in the history of our county for a Texas House race. We knocked on more doors than any other campaign had in the history of Collin County. And that was during our primary, before we got stopped. That's the kind of energy we've been harnessing. And being raised here, I remember going out and to vote and barely having any Democrats to choose from. So even when I was in the primary and I showed up to vote in that Democratic primary for myself and my campaign, to see such a robust and ballot full of people that are from my community, who are trying to improve the lives of the people within my community, has just been so special. I can't explain to you, when I was door knocking for other candidates and things, I'd be emotional and I'd still be taking in the news. And now I've been able to kind of block it out. And I feel like I'm always doing something productive to get our community, our country, our state over this line that I think we need to get over in order to try to bring some new perspective, accountability, true representation. I'm not a politician. That's the thing I always try to tell people. That's why I and I like a lot when I'm talking. That's why, you'll hear me make mistakes when I'm speaking. But, it's that authenticity I think people really appreciate. And like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of people here are, my community is very diverse. I think that sometimes when people look at it, they see themselves or they see their children, and that's what they're inspired by, that you can get a good education, be a kid, whose mother used to go to bed hungry to feed in, and now be running to represent the community that able, to get me over the edge. In my business, when I was successful in college, I give thanks to my community for that. And I think, at least I'm feeling the love from everyone here. And I know what we're trying, and I understand that the nature of it is really important. So we're just trying to stay focused. But it's been a wonderful, wonderful time campaigning. I know the world is burning in the background, which is a little concerning, but I'm really focused on making sure that I do my job, and I'm hoping that these other people who are running throughout the country will be successful in their races if they want to bring good representation to the people that they're serving.
Yeah, you said something really interesting. I think it's a quote that I recently heard. I think those who are part of PPT staff watching are going to remember, but it's you are not someone. It's essentially saying that you are not someone by yourself. You are someone with a community behind you, or with a partner. And I think that is just like I think that is great that you bring up your communities and your upbringing and what essentially, made you who you are and this amazing candidate that we are now all looking forward to being in the Texas House. So what was like a key moment that you like thought was like, you know what, I'm going to run? Or what would, that like moment, I don't know if it happened in the middle of the night, in the morning, in the afternoon, but you were like, you know what, I am going to run.
I, I was always an organizer in college. That's where I started to realize that, the power that lies behind organizing. If people won't listen to you, organize a group of people who feel passionately about the same topic that you do, and you can make your voice, unstoppable. You can make it so loud that they have to pay attention. And that's what I was trying to do here in Collin County. After the 2016 election, I started volunteering for every candidate I could find that I believed in: city council, school board, these really important races that just don't get as much attention. I was block walking, tricking my friends to be like, hey, let's come over. We're going to watch this new series on Netflix. I'm going to order pizza. And they'd show up and postcards set around and markers. Like, we're going to write 10 apiece, and then we're going to get started with our night. And eventually they started catching on and didn't want to show up. So, I realized that it was hard for me to pass on that passion that I was feeling about a candidate to other people. But people were passionate about trying to help me, help these people. So I realized that maybe if I was the candidate, we'd be able to succeed in building a movement that would help the Democratic Party here in Collin County, but also help, continue to keep some of these really important issues in the conversation, because there is certain, Democrats and there's some Republicans who just avoid certain issues because they think it's not popular, or they think that, they'll pay a political price for it. But if there's issues that need to be spoken about, that's what your job is. To have those difficult conversations, and then to try to sell it to your community. If you really believe in what you're talking about, I want to go out there and talk to my community about them and let them know, not hide away in a legislative office, passing laws and not wanting to speak to it, or then having to come back in line and pretend like I'm a good person afterwards. I want to do it now, and continuing those kind of conversations, I just think is so important. And yeah, like you said earlier, listening is really important, but also then taking that information you do to try to improve people's lives. Otherwise, if I'm just listening and sticking to my, preconceived notions already, that's not helping anybody. But I'm willing to work with anybody, Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter what they are. If they want to do something good for their community, they have a partner in me, and we're going to get good things done in the Texas legislature this session.
Okay, I'm so excited. So, if elected, you will be the only openly LGBTQ plus man in the Texas legislature, and the first Latino from Collin County ever elected to the state legislature. So, why is that so needed right now? Why is, more than ever?
These conversations are needed to be had. I know, not being a politician, I was a really private person before this. I wasn't looking to rub elbows or make connections. I was just working to have a fulfilled life and volunteer my time to the organizations I felt really passionate about. But as I started speaking to people and talking to them, I started realizing the real importance in my story. So when I talk about my mother coming across the border as a 12-year-old with her youngest brother, I'm trying to speak of her work ethic, her desire to try to find her family and live that better life. And I think it's an important conversation to be had, the fact that my mother did go to bed hungry to make sure that my sister and I were fed. And now we have these, opportunities in front of us that we need real change. So we need all these conversations to be a part of the conversation. If you're not letting your voice be heard you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're not bringing those kind of perspectives into the equation that we need to build a better future. So I see the greatness in my community, and it's not lost on me. The El Paso shooter came from this district. He could have easily have chosen a target here within district, but he chose to drive across the state to commit his, atrocities and murders there. And it's a rejection, I think, for my community. Those kind of ideas are not welcome here. We care about each other. This is not the kind of hatred that anyone in my community believes we should be preaching. And I think that it shows that difference, that people want someone who is going to talk to them, tell them the truth, fight on behalf of their families. We're not always going to come to an agreement on every single topic, but everyone knows that I'm going to go and fight for them. And make sure that I'm taking care of their families and leaving those opportunities available in the future. The opportunities to have health care, to have that great public education that I received, that we build economic recovery from COVID that isn't going to leave anybody behind. We know that every time we have one of these economic crises, we leave people behind. It needs to end now. We need to demand a better governance than that, because we are tied together. We're woven together in this fabric here in Texas. I always tell people this is one of the most, I am a big Texas cheerleader. We have diversity. We have great individuals. We believe in freedoms, and we just need representatives that are going to go and fight for those things now.
Yes, I think everything that you've said, is so inspirational. And you did bring this up earlier, but I do believe many people see themselves in you because of what you've gone through, because of the common threads they have with you and your story and your mom's story. And it is truly inspirational to see you run. As for me as well, I was also born from a single mom, and I'm a Mexican American. My family are immigrants. So, again, I think a lot of people see themselves in you, and it's so amazing watching someone like you run the campaign that you're running. And so for those who are young now, and for young Lorenzo, what is the advice? What could you tell yourself back then, where you honestly could have never imagined someone like yourself running in Texas for a state representative seat? What would you tell them? What would you like to tell young Lorenzo?
Not to get overwhelmed. There's so many things that I like. Even when I started getting into this race, or before, I guess, I could never choose topics. Like, what is your one, real passion? Who do you want to go and fight for? And I was like, I want to fight for everybody. That's what I want to do. I don't want to focus on one topic. Everything is so important to different, universes. I think of my sister who's raising my niece with epilepsy. She's nonverbal, requires constant medical care because she could, seize and die. And people don't, realize that there's so many families within our communities that are dealing with a sick loved one, and they just need to be heard. We need our government to stop working against people. I heard recently when I was at a healthcare conference with some of the Democratic House delegation here in Texas, we had people talk about the fact that we're so afraid sometimes that someone may abuse the system, that we make it so hard that the people that need it the most won't even take the time to go and apply for these programs. We need to stop that. I mean, we really need to put a renewed focus on making sure that we're taking care of people. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be addressing any sort of corruption or any sort of greed that may be taking place in the system, but I'm saying that we need to really look out for people and make sure that the way that we're legislating and the way that we're composing ourselves and, the way that we're speaking to people isn't making things worse, really. I just am so over all the divisiveness, that gets brought up in these political races, that really these issues don't affect people's households. They're just trying to scare people. They're just trying to, that there's a birther movement behind, getting me deported to send me back to where I came from, which is, hilarious because they're not going to go very far. They'll drop me off the plane. But I mean, it's really disturbing, and I think it's just because people continue those narratives, and that's how people are, I guess, are trying to win elections. But I think we need to rise above that, and it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. Hold these accountable every single day. It is our job, as citizens of our community, to make sure that we are doing that. And hopefully we can continue to inspire people, and all these volunteers that we have right now will be hounding me every day. I hope so, because I need to be held accountable. These politicians have gone too long with they don't have to answer to anybody because they get their millions from, 2 or 3 donors. If you saw our last finance report, we got, near 13,000 contributors this last quarter compared to 200 from my competitor. I mean, it's sad. It's sad that this is happening in our country. And Texas has unlimited amounts of contributions. There's so many issues that we just need politicians that are going to continue to talk about this. If we want to build a future where people like you and I can run, we're going to have to address this, system of unlimited amounts of contributions, where you can have a competitor that gets $5 million, and there's going to be no way for you to even get your voice out. They're going to drown it out with that money. And so many things, access to the vote, we need just criminal justice reform. And these things are things that Texas should be leading. And I know that those, deep inside, every single one of us has those feelings that we want to build a fairer, freer Texas for the generations to come, and one that generations will actually be able to enjoy as well.
Oh my gosh, you have us all so inspired, and so many people are here riled up and ready to get to work to make sure we put you in the Texas House. So what is, how can we help? How can the people watching, how can they support your campaign? How can they get plugged in?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, 13,000 donors. I always used to be like, well, it's going to be hard to get so many people to donate to this campaign, knowing that we're up against millions. But every dollar really does count. If you have $1, if you have 5, if you have 10, give what you can. If you don't, share, like our comments, comment on our comments, or on our posts on social media. That kind of thing gets exposure throughout the state. It lets people know that our campaign is here, and it does drive people to maybe give donations. We're doing phone banking, we're doing text banking, so you can go to lorenzofortexas.com, FOR, and you can sign up there to volunteer. We'll have someone reach out to you, but we're working nonstop until November 4th. I doubt I'll get very much sleep yesterday. It was after another, and running 5 minutes late to each one. But this is, everyone is giving me so much energy and inspiration by the energy that they're putting to this campaign, that I know I'm going to be okay come November 4th. And we're just going to keep running and raising that money that we to keep our message out there, regardless of the attacks that we have made against us from, the sheriff and the constables here, trying to send me back to wherever I came from. But they're all Republicans, and it's a political game. They're friends with the incumbent, and I was aware of that, and it's only going to get probably uglier as the election comes on, and they continue to call for ICE to investigate me. So,
oh my God.
I promise my life is actually really boring. So if they find it, it's a surprise to me too. We were talking to my family, and they're like, "Yeah, they got to make up lies because you're not that interesting."
You're interesting. You have proven to be very interesting on this chat, so we're good.
It's my sister teasing me most of the time. So she's my older sister. She takes advantage of it, especially when these slate cards come out, and the top 9 seats here in Texas are all, we have a lot of incumbents running from 2018 in these seats again, but most of them identify as female or woman, and I'm the only one there, and my sister's like, "This is so fitting for you." Like, she's like, "Lorenzo and the ladies, Lorenzo and the ladies."
That is, yes. But all right, Lorenzo, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are rooting for you like crazy over at PPTV. I know our supporters. We got really good feedback last night from our phone bank. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, we can't wait to see you in the Texas House.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything everyone is doing across the state to help these candidates get elected. I want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. Like I said, I cannot do this alone. I'm running to go and represent the community that helped raise me. So the fact that people are trying to get me there, to give me that opportunity, I'm so grateful for it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you guys. Well, that was our power breakfast this morning. I don't know about y'all, but I felt very inspired by Lorenzo and definitely really excited to do everything we have to do to make sure he is in the next legislative session in 2021. So before we go, PPTV is also phone banking every Monday and Thursday. This upcoming week, we will be phone banking for Representative Aaron Zwiener and House candidate Akila Basie, which are both just so amazing. I also love them so much. And we are also really excited to get them into the Texas House. So the link for those phone banks are in our bio. Remember, guys, we can make history in Texas. And, you know, it's going to take a little bit more than for us to just vote. It's going to take us calling, talking to our family, talking to our friends, making sure everyone we know has a plan to go vote and goes vote very safely. But yeah, so if we all come together, we can have a pro-choice majority in the Texas House and we can make history. All right, you guys, have a great morning. And I hope you guys feel as empowered as I do.